Hello and welcome to another episode of the Contract Warrior podcast. Today we're going to talk about why KOs are more cautious today. I am your host, Christopher Williams, and I am a former federal contracting officer of 17 years, cradle to grave contracting, construction, A&E, services, REAs, claims, whatever, you name it. That is the experience being thrown into this podcast, and particularly on this topic. Why KOs are more cautious today. Before we start, I just want to remind everybody about that training, Think Like Your KO. That is free training. Go to thinklikeyourko.com and identify exactly how to better communicate with RFIs in pre-award and post-award so that your KO can help support you as well. With that said, let's jump into this episode and let's talk about KOs and why they're more cautious today. So there's a couple of angles here that I would like to approach this topic with, and one of them is externally and the other one is internally. So the KO is attacked on both sides, and this doesn't always happen, but it seems to be a continual increase in undermining or impact, if you will, to a KO. And first, before I talk about externally and internally, the KO's responsibility, if you look into the federal acquisition regulations, is a very unique responsibility. They have to ensure everything is legitimate, everything is fair and reasonable, and everything is dialed in. And so when they sign that contract, when they sign that letter, when they sign that document, whatever it may be, they are pledging that is exactly what is happening and what this document and this signature represents. There has been oversight that is diligent enough where this is within the best interest of the government, and here is why. There's documentation and so forth. All of that is on that one individual to demonstrate to what? To the regulations, to the law, right? To the federal procurement law. So that is a big deal, and it's a unique position, and that with that said, it has a lot of stress, which can cause a lot of caution. Now that we know that is the task at hand, right? And a lot of us are aware, but I just want to clarify that's the task at hand. How does that task get impacted externally and internally? Well, externally, we have our famous regulations, all that red tape, right? And that red tape comes from afar, all the way up to DC, all the way up through Congress, or even locally, where changes can be made simply because one motive or another. I don't want to get into the weeds of what drives what, but there's a little bit of a mixed bag between real true incentive to try to lessen red tape, which unfortunately can also compound red tape because agencies don't really understand what other agencies are doing. It's almost if everybody's walking around with two left feet. And I'm not saying this to badmouth the government. I'm saying this because this is true. You can't, if you walk around with two left feet, you're only going to go one direction. So if nobody's walking straight or nobody's communicating or nobody's vetting policy, then you end up with hypocrisy or overlap or impacts and so forth. And this is the nightmare of your contracting officer. And for that matter, everybody involved in procurement, which eventually impacts the contractors. And it takes years to course correct bad policy on top of it. And so luckily that's not the norm, but that is it's not the norm, but it is rather frequent. And every October, new things come out that identify, what is going to be more heartburn or what's going to be better for the procurement process. Now, you kind of can't have it both ways, right? At the same time, diligent documentation is necessary because everything is being paid for by Treasury dollars, which requires Treasury oversight. And that's really the nucleus of the whole effort, is trying to ensure responsibility and accountability when taxpayer dollars are being spent. Now, lastly, I want to talk about internal impacts that affect your KO and why they become cautious. And yes, we've already talked about the contractor. We've already talked about policies. Internally, we have the contracting officer's own people their own leadership, senior leadership at the local level and senior leadership all the way up the chain of command that can undermine the KO's responsibility. And this is really sad because they understand the procurement cycle and all the regulations more than anyone, at least they're supposed to. And they know what's better and what's wrong. And yet they try to leverage or influence the KO to sign things anyways. Without a waiver, without oversight, it's just kind of mad dogged through with peer pressure. Yes, like high school, peer pressure to get a KO to sign something. The reality is, if you're not a strong contracting officer, you will be influenced to approve things. And that's unfortunate. That is not professional. So you have a KO who can be attacked from all angles, essentially. And it is my honor as a former contracting officer to be transparent with the federal contractors and to share this information. This isn't whistleblowing. This isn't anything of that nature. You can look online and find all kinds of forums and all kinds of dialogue that talks about this. And this is just an issue. It's thankfully not as common, but it exists. And so if your KO is cautious, chances are it's because they've been abused, right? Abused by the system, abused by internal people. So when they find contractors, federal contractors they can partner with, and internal federal workers like engineers and other contracting, like contract specialists and other KOs, it works out amazingly. But there becomes a very obvious difference when you have the opposing group coming into the arena on particular projects. So it's very distinctful. So that's pro, that it's a distinction between how this happens. It doesn't just happen accidentally. It becomes like a bow wave of unsat execution because it's not in accordance with the contract. Some of you may have experienced this as contractors where the government has forced you to do something and it was absolutely outside the contract. And this is a good time for me to call out my bonus training. It's titled The Profit Denial Theory. And the reason why this exists is because of the mindset of expectations between the profit and nonprofit or not-for-profit mindset and what the government does inadvertently because they're not in charge of profit. And the contractor can easily just absorb the work and be in dire straits because they were influenced by a meeting they had or something. So take that training. That's part of the tour guide version of Think Like Your KO. I have that bonus in there, profit denial theory. I also have another bonus about the KO personalities. I also have another training, a bonus training about the procurement cycle. The goal of that training is for me to give back to the federal contractors knowledge, right? In terms of what your contracting officer would expect. And even if they're not receptive, you'll at least know how to document. The tour guide version, I walk you through that, through the guide, and I give you live examples and I go through it. It's just a training, right? There's a bunch of videos involved. And then there are 3 bonus sections. One is the procurement cycle itself. So you'll have a macro understanding of the whole procurement and pre-award and post-award. And then you'll also have the KO personalities, so you can try to distinguish the contracting officer that you're dealing with. And then also profit denial theory, where you can get an idea of why it is that the government personnel that you're interacting with are acting in the way that they are. There's a true distinction. And so all of that training should arm you as a federal contractor with enough knowledge and ability to at least foresee or navigate forward in documentation those landmines that may occur in any instance. It doesn't have to be Department of the Navy or the Army or Air Force. It could be anywhere, but with federal procurement and namely DOD, but it's absolutely worth it. I'm excited to put it out there. I'm excited to put all this out there simply because, one, it's already publicly available, but number 2, none of this is taught anywhere else. And federal contractors need to understand the environment in which they're performing in. And if I can be part of that, then the training was worth my time to produce. And for those of you that that know me, you know that I was stressed out my first year of doing federal contracts in 2008, and I nearly resigned because of it. But it was the federal contractors that helped me see how this whole system works. And it paid dividends for the next 16 years as I worked with federal contractors. So I've worked in the field offices. I get the challenges. I see what's happening. And just know I've been a cautious KO before. And I've also, especially when I didn't know what I was facing. And, but see, you can't tell your contractor these issues, just like I wouldn't want the contractor to tell me about their subcontract problems, right? Unless you need to replace the subcontractor, I don't care about the drama. I just need the job done. But there's a point of humanity there that needs to be shared so there can be empathy or sympathy in terms of partnering. That's very valuable. And it usually happens naturally with regular engagement in relationships and conversations, and respect, right? Respect and organization and just over time. And there is a clear distinction between contractors who are here for the longevity and contractors that are shopping around. And then there's also there's a clear distinction between the government side, who is career orientated and who is burnt out, and what to do with that, right? So it is my honor to share any kind of insights I might have. None of it is proprietary, all of it, and none of it is legal advice, right? All of it is information only. And I hope you guys check it out. And with that said, hopefully I've tied into a lot of great points in terms of why your KO is more cautious today. Just know in the end, they're trying to navigate per the contract, just like the contractor. And collectively, that is how the job gets done. All the other variables are a distraction or a motive to try to get the contracting officer to move faster or to get the contractor to move faster. But in the end, when the smoke clears, it's the company owner and the contracting officer who need to come to terms with the contract they both signed. Okay? And that's just the bottom line, and that's how it works. It's the ugly truth of it all, but it's the actual benefit of it all, because you need to know that truth in order to survive it and be part of it, right? Supporting the warfighter. Now, we don't want the warfighter to know about all of this. They probably already know anyways, because I remember when I was in the barracks wondering why things were the way they were, but I didn't need to know all the details I just put out in this episode. I just needed to know why isn't there any hot water? Why is there mold in my shower? Why am I working outside of a Quonset hut? Why don't I have a building? Whatever. Like, the warfighter needs to be protected. And when everybody does their job correctly and works as a team, then the warfighter is supported very, very quickly and accurately. I've seen it time and time again with good contractors and good federal workers. But when you have a cautious KO, it's because that particular project or that particular KO has been beat up. And somewhere, somehow, one side or the other is participating outside of the contract and making things way hard on your KO. And that's why they're cautious. So I hope you guys take that training of KO personalities. It's really a good training, and the rest of the training with that said. Thank you for your time. We went a little extra on this particular episode. If you want to provide any feedback or engage with me, just go to contractorko.com. I might use some of your questions on future episodes. And again, thanks for your time. Have a good one, and we'll see you later.